her son was going to school today. So she said she'll come back. She said she had a film that we could watch, but she would like to be here in person so that she could answer all the questions that we might have. We could establish a personal relationship. So what we'd like to do now is kind of debrief from the morning. What are the pluses, the minuses? Then we want to talk about our branches. How can we build capacity in our branches? What are some of the key issues that we believe we should address? Does anybody want to come up closer? Or are you all Methodists sitting in the back of the church? Methodists sitting in the back of the church.
You know, we're going to try to keep brief as possible, but I think we need to highlight the things we learned this morning. I thought it was very beneficial. The information that was given to us, I think that in both the education and the very, very informative. But how do we get that back to our community? What do we need to do? It does no good for us to get it here and not utilize what we learned. So, what are your thoughts about that? What do we need to do? It's difficult sometimes in our community to get people out for things like that. They don't see the importance of something like that. How do we make it so make it interesting that they want to come out and hear about because generational wealth. That's important. It's very important. And they touched on that today. In our educational system here in West Virginia, it's something that we need to be really concerned about because it's affecting our children, those who are able to stay in the system, that they don't suspend out of the system. So we need to be able to address those things. What are your feelings on those things?
I would suggest one thing that I think we could start more is using the West Virginia newspapers and doing press releases or opinion pieces and press releases with like a continuous feeding of the press. So they get accustomed to printing the newest NAACP news.
Well, I think that is good. I think that we need to let people know that we're still active in the state. You know, there a lot of people don't feel like that we're doing anything. The NAACP is not doing anything. Why should I be associate myself with the NAACP? They're not doing anything. You know what I tell them? It's your fault. What do you mean it's my fault? I said, you might be the answer to what we need, so why don't you come and join us so we can improve what we're doing? So it's your fault that we're not doing anything. You've got all these good ideas about what we ought to be doing and everything, so come and bring your ideas. So don't blame me who's out here trying to do something. I blame you. It's your fault because you won't come and join us and trying to implement some of these great ideas that you had. So I turn it back on them and say it's your fault. But, you know, what we learned today about wealth, in the average African-American home, those things are not discussed. They're not. And we need to start even setting up some little workshops or seminars sponsored by the NAACP with our young people, teaching them how to manage and budget money, how to invest money, and do those types of things. Those are the types of things I think that we as a branch can do. The education, we need to stay involved. Some of the things that are happening across this state, it's disasters. There's horror stories all across this state about our young people and things that are occurring to them in the school system. It was hard for me to believe that after living in Harrison County all my life, that the Board of Education was getting ready to bring charges against a 12-year-old girl for terroristic threats. Now, how much terroristic threats could that young lady bring? But if we hadn't stepped in there, that would have been a mark against her for the rest of her life. The rest of her life. Something that occurred at 12 years old. And I truly believe if we hadn't stepped in and interceded in her behalf, they were going to go through with that. They were going to, because at the same time that this happened, do you remember all across the state, there was some threats sent to schools all across the state. 9 or 10 schools who received some kind of bomb threats or something all across the state. And I think that they were looking for somebody to make an example of, and so this was an opportunity for them to make an example out of one of our children. And let me tell you another story. We had a young lady in our community. She was chosen homecoming queen. And she had some disabilities. Being chosen a homecoming queen, that's a popularity contest is what it is, But she was able, amongst her peers, to be chosen homecoming queen. Well, they had some type of policy at homecoming dance that you had to come buy your tickets at the door early. Well, she didn't get there. She was 2 minutes late. They turned her around, wouldn't allow her to go to the homecoming dance. 2 minutes late. Now, can you imagine what that girl's senior year is going to be remembered by her? That she was chosen homecoming queen and wasn't able to go to the homecoming ball because she was 2 minutes late. Well, there were some that were unhappy because she was chosen. So this is their way of retaliating. And we went up there and seen that principal, went to the superintendent of schools. Even the superintendent of schools said, I can't believe that he did that. But still, it was done, and she's going to remember her senior year that she was chosen homecoming queen and wasn't able to go to the homecoming dance because she was 2 minutes late. They should have rolled out the red carpet. She was the queen. If she came a half hour late, she was the queen. So we really need to monitor our education, and I think that the information that we gain from the individuals today should be very helpful for us to go back to our branches with. Yes, it is. Yeah. Sylvia?
First of all, I thought the session this morning, the information was very good. There was a heavy concentration on children, and that just happened to be my concentration. And I'm thinking, you know, there's the old saying that talk is cheap. You heard that? And it is. And so I think we're at a point now where we have to start acting. And so in order to engage our young people and have them involved as we move along, because this is a year that is going to be troublesome and it's going to get worse. So how do we get our kids engaged in helping us? I just um, such as maybe an open forum. One that they pass once and then they walk out happy. So I mean, it's just you know things that pop off your top of your head. Maybe it might work, but you have to try it. So I'm just saying, we need young people, and the way we can get young people is to give them something to do.
You know, the importance of their vote. You know, I hear so many young people say, my vote don't count. Yeah, yeah, your vote don't count when you don't vote. That's the only time your vote don't count. But I don't think they really realize the importance of the vote. Everything in their life is affected by their vote. The people who pass the law, you know, the taxes, everything, there's very few things in their walk of life that their vote doesn't affect. Why? Because they vote for people who generate the laws and the regulations. And I don't think they don't make that contact. You know, that that how they vote is important and what it affects. You know, if ever we can look at the way the country is being ran now, all those people who are complaining that didn't go out and vote, they could see it, how important their vote is.
And also, just to piggyback off of what Ms. Sylvia said, that's a great idea. And what can be added to that is the importance of voting. This is the 60th anniversary of our voting rights.
Right.
We're still in jeopardy of being able to vote. Yes. So, I mean, what more important issue for teens to have that they can see the importance of
What do you think about what's going on in Texas? I can't tell you. Well, where's Beyonce from? Oh, she's from Texas. You know, they know that, but they cannot tell you about what's going on in Texas. Every so often, I call my grandchildren up, and I'll ask them about something that's going on in the country to see what kind of response I get out of it. I do that, and I know they don't do it, but when they come to visit with me, if they're there a week, I make them watch a half-hour news every day. I said, oh, this is boring. I said, you need to watch a half-hour news. I don't care. Well, I got basketball. I said, you can record it. Watch it at your leisure. You need to know what's going on in the world. You need to know. And so I make them watch a half-hour news every day to realize what's going on.
Because you think about it, I'm sure we all have. Selling Bob, our little choo-choo train has reached the top of the hill. We're heading down the hill. I mean, it's the bottom line. We need people that have vinegar in their blood. The choo-choo trains, they need to get excited about it because this is their future. I was listening to the guy talking about the investments. That's great that we know about it. But these
the 4-H car, Washington Carver, she used to have it there. But I got a note from her this morning that said that she can't find the biggest impediment to having that is Louisville State University. You know, we went to Marshall. But I think that we need to be more engaged, hands-on with our children. In Greenberg County, we came up with this group that was all about education and intervening. We said we had a town hall meeting and we asked the parents and the young people what was going on in the public schools. And it was the same thing that has been happening for 60 years. You know, the same thing that a parent said they were called, their children are being called. And so what we said to them was, we want to be your first contact. If you feel like your child has been mistreated, call us first. And then the NAACP unit set up a pressure on the Board of Education, the County Board of Education. Amazing when we would go into those rooms. They would, you know, just give you some stuff up here. And I would say, well, did you know that 3 black students were kicked out of school yesterday? No, I didn't know anything about it. Didn't know anything about it. So what we started to do is we knew more than the principals and the teachers about what was really happening to our kids in school. And then we set up like a buddy system because they have these, I think they're called individual performance IPEs or something like that. We would go in, we would have these 2 advocates with the mother and the child, or the child alone. But we would sit there and we would go around the room. And what was amazing to me is the principal was there, the counselors were there, and what surprised me is a lot of times the teacher said, I really like this child, you know. And in this my class, in art or English, she's great, you know what I mean? And so by the time we got around the room, the parent and the child both were in a state of almost surprise. But what we did was we said, okay, what is it that we need to work on? You know, and we set up certain goals, you know, like they would have to attend school, you know, that they would have to have an after-school program. But I think that they need someone sitting with us. There was this young woman who started was accused of threatening the life of one of the teachers. And it's one of those, again, that's about 12 years old. And so those of us who were in this group, we said to the mother, look in the dictionary and see what threatening, you know, all those words that they had on the paper. Let's ask, tell me, what did my child do that made you think your life was being threatened? And so the teacher said, oh, you know, I was just having a bad day that day. You know what I mean? But I think some of this stuff can be cut off, you know what I mean, in terms of suspensions if we get involved. The other thing that I think that we need to do is a lot of people say the NAACP doesn't do anything. And Robin Crawford, who's the president of the Greenberg branch, we were talking about that. We do a lot of things. You all know you do a lot of things. Those of you who are secretary, treasurer, fundraising, we do a lot of work. It's just that we don't, it's not known or shown. And one of the things that we're going to do in Greenberg is we're going to have T-shirts. I don't know for Florence, Matthew, and Sylvia, and Johnny, and Robin, when we went to the convention, every state had their T-shirt on, and it said the NAACP. Why aren't we wearing our NAACP T-shirt? Are we ashamed of being a part of the NAACP? We need to be proud of it because it's a 116-year legacy of fighting for social justice. We should have caps that say NAACP. We're not scared of you. You know, we got our eyes on you, and we are involved in many of these issues, but they don't see us. So that's one of the things that we're going to hope to do is to invest in some T-shirts. We were told by a woman who's going to be here tomorrow that their youth group had a project to raise money, and they sold T-shirts. And that was the way that they started their pool of money. I think there needs to be incentives for youth. I think in every community that we're probably all guilty of not stepping out and saying, you know, George over there is doing really good in school, or George, over there is doing a good job playing basketball or football. There should be an opportunity for us as the NAACP to acknowledge the gifts and talents of our young people. That's the thing that I am most concerned about. Because I was a psychology major. What are we doing to their sense of importance and competence? Are we belittling these people and these young people thinking that they can't do it? I had a godson who said that one of the teachers said, you're going to end up in prison just like your brother. That is unacceptable. You know, we need to be able to, either through newsletters or at events that we have, bring them up or write an article for the newspaper and say, this is the student of the month. The NAACP of Jefferson County identifies so-and-so as the student of the month, so that we put these people out and let people see that's important. And then, of course, tomorrow you're going to hear a lot about social media. Kids, hey, I took 50 kids to Washington, to the African American Museum and the Native American Museum, and I wanted to slit my wrist by the time I got back. They were just awful. And so I went up, my sister, who you met today, was at a football game, and I walked up to her and I said, I'm going to slit my wrist. That is just was awful. It was awful. She said, kids aren't like they used to be. We keep trying to tell you all that, but you all don't. You think things are still the same. So I think that, you know, social media, if they do not read, you know, and that's the reason why newspapers are going out of business. They don't get their information from newspapers. They get it from social media. When the young girl over at Greenboro West was being called Marilla and all kinds of terrible things, and she lost 50 pounds, the way that information got out was through social media. The kids had a link and they told everybody about it. And what was so interesting, I said to the superintendent of schools, because he called and wanted to know what our opinions were, and I said, well, whatever you do, make sure that you know, are truthful, because these kids are different from what we were when we were growing up. They had everything on video. They had things on video. They had things, you know, that they shared around, and everybody in the community knew about what was going on. And so then the superintendent got on TV and lied, and that made him look even worse than before. But I just think that, you know, incentives. We were talking about having, you know, for Black History, and Black History shouldn't be just 1 month. It should be year-round. And each one of our branches could afford to buy a book that we engage our children in to read about. That is historical and entertaining. And then we could have, for example, maybe a contest or something, for someone in there doing the review, and put money up, you know, for things that they do. Kids are incentivized by money. They really are. You know, if you say, you know, if you win this, you're going to get $100 or something like that. But if we organized ourselves, we could do that. Not only that, we could find people in the community who would contribute to something like that.
Well, I think what you're saying kind of leads into our next topic of discussion, and that's our branches and the restructuring of our branches. What are we going to do to get here today? We're meeting, I think here today, we're meeting, and we only have, what, 4 branches represented here? Um, you know, in some of our major cities, are not represented. Morgantown, Wheeling. I did see Reverend English, but he's not here now. We didn't have anybody from Charleston here this morning, you know. So what are we going to do to restructure our branches? You know, those things that Loretta talked about, they're good, but who's going to implement them? We need somebody here to implement those things, and it has to be the adults in the room. So, so we need to start thinking about what do we have to do to get our branches active. And one of the things that I think that, about is we might have to regionalize our activities and have. I think that Greenbrier represents what, 4 or 5 counties, you know, and I think that we're going to have to do more of that type of things to get the numbers. You know, we're having difficulty. We're supposed to have 50 paid members. 50 paid members. We can't get 50 paid members. So we have to do something. We have to make a change because what we're doing is not working. So we're going to have to make some changes someplace to do something differently to get the branches. Now, I talked to some of my friends up in Ohio County and Wheeling, and I asked them if they were coming. They said they weren't coming because Bernie Sanders was coming to town today, and they're staying up here to hear Bernie Sanders, you know. And, you know, that's important, but what we're doing is Bernie Sanders is going to leave town tomorrow or this evening, and we still have the same problems we had when Bernie Sanders came to town. So what are we going to do to try to get our branches active, get people involved? And I think that that's what should be our main topic of discussion these next 2 days and how we go about doing that.
One, I think, is do away with the rules of having to have 50 members. Because it just means that we're spending all this time and effort into drumming up support when we could put time and effort into activities where the support and the interest would come on their own. And I think having so many small communities with people keeping changing, leaving communities, moving into communities, this 50 people rule, and this other thing with the kids rule that they have to have how many kids to become a chapter, those rules need to go.
Over every place. I said, I'll take you to McDowell County and you'll see if you can get in touch with people. Know us. I said, I don't look like you and you don't look like me and she doesn't look like me, but we're all boots on the ground and we need the NAACP. And so they promised me that they were going to look into that. But I think to reinforce that is that we could write a resolution here before we leave.
Yeah.
And send it on to the national office.
But, you know, my experience with the national office, even if we didn't have 50 members, they recognized us in cases when we went to them and asked. They recognize us as still being members. You know, we,
Charles, isn't that why Charleston isn't here? It's because they're not included?
they're at the multi-fest probably. Um, yeah, started on Thursday. But in my experience with the national office, you know, yes, they never didn't like it because we didn't have 50 members. But if we went to them with a legitimate request and we were less than that, they honored our request. So I don't think that we can use that as a reason for us not functioning. We and in most cases, and like in most organizations, even if you have 50 members, only 10 of them are functioning. You know, so
I have not been or heard of a meeting where they're the keynote speaker or
money.
this portal thing was off the chain as far as I'm concerned. But I just think that they need to get involved too. So I don't know how you do that or what that's going to do, but every
I think that if we're looking for the national office to solve our problems, they're not going to get solved. We're going to have to decide how we're going to solve our problems ourselves. You know, to think that for Fairmont for years had an active branch is inactive now. You know, and other cities in the state. You know, what do we? And Fairmont has a fairly large minority population. You know, one of the things I think that has hurt us is that our churches are not involved in the NAACP anymore. They've always been a source of recruitment for us and pastors involved. Somehow we need to get pastors back involved in the NAACP. And I don't want to beat up on Franklin too hard about these pastors, but somehow we need them. You know, they have an active audience every week, every week. You know, and if once a month they got up there and said, "Hey, y'all need to join the NAACP," and I think it would make a big difference in our community. So maybe one of the things that we need to do, the first thing we need to do, is there is a pastors committee, a religion committee. What is it called? Religious affairs. We need to get that activated, and we need to go back to our communities and call a community meeting of the pastors. But hey, we need your help. And they really need our help because a lot of churches are closing their doors too because people are not going. So we need to do that. You know, I think that wh- go ahead. But what do we do? But what do we do to get the people in the door to implement these things? These are good ideas. I agree with you, but when we call a meeting, you know, 5 or 6 people show up, you know, and it's the same 5 or 6 that are doing everything, you know, in the community, and sooner or later they're burnt out. You know, they're burnout. You know, and I think it ought to be brought to your attention. We had a good educational panel today, but do you know how that panel was supposed to be? It was supposed to be the president of West Virginia State, the president of Bluefield State, and the president of West Virginia Tech. And you know what happened? They all said yes, and then one day, within an hour of each other, uh, they all canceled out and said they had something. You know what happened, don't you? Yeah. The chief, they're afraid of the chief executive officer in the state. You know, they're state employees. Yes, they answer to a board of governors, but that board of governors is appointed by the by the governor. You know, so he controls it. It wasn't a coincidence that within an hour of they all called and canceled out. And you know, we got to utilize the news media. But back in the day, we had leaders in those positions who were bold enough to take a stand. These people today, they're more protective of that job, and they're going not, and then money, they're not going to take that stand. You know, that wasn't a coincidence that happened, and I thought that you should know that. And I think it ought to be known, you know, that they didn't show, and they canceled. Beg your pardon? Yeah, yeah.
But that we had a vibrant discussion about education and had a lot of recommendations as to how that could be improved, even though they weren't present. I think that ought to be said as well.
But that's the kind of society we're living in today. Yes. You need, did you want to say something? Yeah. Yes, yes. I thought I'd seen your hand up. Okay. All right. Sylvia. Oh, go ahead, Sylvia. Yes.
There's a lot of people out there that think this is an organization just for black people.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of people out there who think that we're just Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
We are not. You check your national rules and policies and all.
Right.
We're open to all groups
Anyone.
of people.
Right.
Republicans, Democrats. Now let me give you an example of one Republican lady who is super active as a Democrat. Her name is Bunchy Gray.
Mm-hmm.
Bunchy Gray from Huntington West Virginia.
Sure, I remember.
Okay? Bunchy, they asked Bunchy, well, you're a Republican. Why are you here? She said, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody at City Hall knew Bunchy. And when they saw her coming, they either locked the doors or they sat down and they listened to what she had to say. And she always had plenty to say, and it always made sense. And those people became supporters of the Huntington NAACP. So let's all I'm saying is let's not block ourselves in. Let's open ourselves up. And some people said join other things. But we have to make people understand we're not just here as black people. If you want to join and you have the same ideas that we have about life and our people, join. We don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican.
No, we
Our
don't.
ideals, you join. Join us.
Because I can live long enough to remember the Dixiecrats, and they weren't Republicans, you know. And but yes, our doors are open to anyone who wants to join, and we've always been like that. And I think that we need to continue. We need to come up with at least one thing that we're going to decide to go back and try to strengthen our branches. We ought to come up with one, two, if we could. What is it one thing that we think that we need to do to go back and strengthen our branches? Um,
This is an idea regarding getting clergy. In the 1970s, the Catholic bishops got together and they made the statement that it is a constitutive part of preaching the gospel, working for social justice. A constitutive part of living and preaching the gospel. So you could ask the pastors, do they believe that? That working for social justice is a constitutive part of preaching the gospel. And if they believe that, tell them, well,
do we think that that's the number one thing that we need to go back to our communities and try to organize the religious component of the NAACP and get the pastors back involved and get churches back involved? Or is it something else?
yeah, I think that's, as you think about, how Christianity is set up, but church is probably the bigger audience is going to be with the churches. Okay? And like you said, they're meeting once a week to a bigger audience. So I think that's the start. I don't know if that's the
Why don't we go ahead, Sylvia? A ministerial alliance? No, not all of them, because there's not a whole lot of black churches in some communities. We've only got one in our community. Two, in Clarksburg. And you know, in the past, we had a pretty good agreement with the local ministerial alliance, which consisted of all the churches in that area. And they went defunct. They just started reorganizing a year or so ago in Clarksburg, and they meet on a regular basis. But you know what? They're as scared as these college presidents of their job. They are scared. I went to a couple of the meetings because if I didn't go, there wouldn't be a face there that looks like mine. And, and I asked some of them, and after the meeting, they said, if we were to do that, I wouldn't have no job. I said, well, what about what God asked you to do? They're thinking about survival. And they said, I agree with you, but trying to convince my congregation to do something like that, or me preaching about that from the pulpit, would be my job. Cannot fight a spiritual fight with earthly weapons. Hey, Bishop, could you? I got a question. Maybe you can help us here. We're talking about getting the churches back involved in the NAACP. How do you think that we'd go about doing something like that, or do you think it's an area that we need to work on?
Thank you, sir. My motto here, and most people here in Beckley would tell you that I always say that the church is the community is the church. We have to have one another. We have to have that function. We have to have that fellowship. To me, communication is everything. And as I've been listening to what has been said, I would agree. Probably one of the biggest problems that we're having with the NAACP and the church is the communication problem. The other thing I probably would address real fast is, even as a pastor, is the busyness of time that we have that we're dealing with now. Even with the way we used to do our church services. My mom used to tell me, she said, Tom, you have church 8 days a week. But I find that in the business of time, because work has changed, that everybody is pulling after the parents. and even with the church, that the church has to take another look at this thing and understand that God requires us to be effective in whatever we do. And so one of the things I would probably encourage us to do is to have a better communication system. I like what's going on here today because we're bringing it back into the community. And to me, right here within the community, people are within walking distance. You may say, where are some of the people at? They may be at work, but that doesn't give everybody excuse. Where some of the other pastors at. And so I think it just need to be a better communication level. Hopefully and prayerfully, my prayer is if we continue to go forth with this, if we continue to do this, that we can continue to go back to the church and actually have that one-on-one conversation with the church and with the pastors. Absolutely.
What do you think that we need to communicate with the church?
Never forget where you come from. I think my mom taught me that. My mom's mother passed when she was 3 weeks old. Her father passed when she was 2 years old. It was 8 of them. They lived in Summers County. They were Gores. And, yeah, I'm a Gore. And so they had to be split up. And my mom was raised by her grandmother, who was half white. But she told my mother something, and I wish I could tell you all the stories she said. She said, the one thing you got to remember in life is that whites are always superior. And so it's when she fed that information to me that I began to understand how important it is to know who I am, where we came from, and where we're going to. And so I think the generation of time as I talk to my children, my grandchildren all the time is because I don't allow them to use the N-word in my presence because it had a different connotation when I came along, is to make sure that they have an understanding where we came from and who they are and what is expected of them. So it's sad to say, but in one principle, we need to go back and re-educate the church because the church has forgot its own roots. I'm not talking about spiritually, but I'm talking about naturally. Yeah. And so, as always, I'm willing to do whatever we can do to make sure that we can stay on track because it's tough right now. And what's about to be introduced is even tougher. And it takes not one, it takes each and every one of us living in our own different communities to make sure that we be there for our children.
So we're trying to come up with a strategy to revitalize our branches. And one of the things that we had talked about is there's a religious committee that's in the NAACP structure. Is go revisit that and go to the pastors and say, hey, we need you. Do you think that's the right approach? Or,
Absolutely. But at the same time, there's a kind of a dark area, a gray area, because there's not communication. So what do we do from convention to convention? Mm-hmm. And so that constant input has to be there. And I think that the more we talk about it, the more aware we are of it, the more we'll start showing up.
Well,
And that's a good point because I'm church here would tell you all the time. I always say we just don't want to be a witness. We want to be effective witnesses for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And that's the message that she just said. You just don't want to be talking. You want to be effective at what you're doing. I'm sorry. Me right now. I tell you what. If at 72, I found that it's a whole lot more pressing for me, and I'm a very busy man in the community. I would do whatever I can to help. I am also the first vice prelate to Temple of Praise International Fellowship of Churches. They're in Washington, D.C., so we do a lot of traveling. I'm also on the board of bishops with Bishop T.D. Jakes and some of the others. And so we meet in Columbus, we meet in Dallas, Texas. So I'm doing a whole lot of running. And right now, I'm going to be honest with you, we've been married, my wife and I have been married 54 years, been together 56 years. I'm trying to just settle down a little bit where I can spend just a little bit more time with my wife. The Lord spoke something to me last year, and I continue to remind myself as I share with other pastors that every day that I have with my wife is one less day that I have with her. And so I have to monitor the time that I have, but I would work just as hard as I can with you and for you. There was a time where I was the president for the Greater Beckley Minister Alliance here in Beckley, West Virginia. We're not effective anymore. Good point. We're not effective anymore. But whatever I can do, you can always count on me. I promise you that.
Well, Pastor, I gave you one of the programs, and you look on the program. There's some other pastors in the community that are on the program.
Absolutely.
It wasn't by accident. It wasn't by accident.
Gotcha.
We're doing that to try to maybe pull them in, let them see what we're doing also.
Thank you so much.
One of the great things I think about Bishop is the fact that this is a community church. I mean, there is not another church in this community that's more involved with the people than Bishop Sims.
Bless you.
When I went to ask for money to support this, people were, as soon as I said Bishop Sims, they were on board with it. You see what I'm saying? So maybe what we need to do is when you're having your back to school groups and things like that, if we have communication, we can help.
Thank you so much.
We could be a part of that.
And since she said that.
Now I'm going to tell them something that may not be true.
Okay.
Because, you know, in Greenberg County, they tell a lot of things that aren't true. But
Beckley
anyway,
too.
But I believe this is true.
All right.
Woodrow Wilson High School and Greenberg East High School are competitive, rivals.
Yes.
And at one point, the governor of the state of West Virginia, Jim Justice, called the kids from Beckley thugs.
Absolutely. The girls basketball team. Absolutely.
This pastor right here who called them together, called
Yes.
his community together and said, "You are not thugs."
Yes.
I mean, that is with your finger on the pulse. And I think if we can work together, to be more, involved with that. At our national convention, they had said the church sometimes is very silent on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that most of them know me. I speak up. I'm the Peter. I put my foot in my mouth sometimes, but. Well, I can't stand to see children being abused. And I don't care how you look at it. It may not have been physical, but it was mental, because it always play in the mind that at a championship game that this thing takes place. It shouldn't ever have happened. So regardless as to who it is, the governor can be wrong, just like the preacher can be wrong. But, yeah, my heart's desire is always about community. As you may mention the community, back-to-school community, we've been doing this for over 20 years. And we usually, I think our biggest crowd is like 1,500 people. We finance everything ourselves. And this year it's going to be just a little bit different because we're ready to do some major work to the church here. And so we'll kind of stream it back on some things, but we already got it involved. And not only that, but we did a cookout for the entire community. And doing that cookout for the entire community, we may spend $10,000, but it's worth it. It's bringing people together. That's the message.
Well, Pastor, I would like to see you in the role of advisor. I'm going to put you on speed down, so so you'll be able to advise them. And your respectability, everyone respects you, and the mere fact that I can go out and say, well, I talked to Bishop Sims, and he thinks that we ought to maybe lean this way. I think that carries a lot of weight.
Bless you.
And we appreciate you allowing us to come back into the community.
It's an honor. It's an honor. Come on back anytime. It's an honor.
And,
God bless you.
And we really appreciate it. And they've been very, very cooperative. This is my first unofficial position as the director for the convention. Bounced on me, but it's been run smooth, and I appreciate that. I really do.
I'm going to tell you one of my frustrations is
I would still like to go back again to the communication aspect as a major focus. For example, this conversation here, if we have somebody who recorded it and then we either put it on the social media, maybe next time we should be recording whenever those types of conversation happen, and then throw it into either the Facebook pages of the NAACP immediately, but also on the social media of organizations that we are communicating with. And say the NAACP, West Virginia NAACP.
Okay, we got 18 minutes left. So let's see if we can't wrap this up. 3:42, we're closing down at 4 o'clock, so we'll be back here at 6. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I see the national office is doing national TV fundraising for only 19 cents a day. I'm thinking if the branches across the state could come together, put together a promo that could be for raising funds and also getting information out there in not only traditional areas but in non-traditional areas to let people know what the NAACP is doing, and if this could be done through public service announcements or some vehicle that could be done periodically or whatever, however often, that it would be an opportunity to let people know, based on what's been put together by the organization, that what the NAACP is all about, and also recruiting. And like I said, it could be done in traditional and non-traditional areas, so not just black, white, Asian, whatever, whoever you can get to join.
I think that's a real good idea, but we've got to be realistic. Anything dealing with black is not going to be very receptive with the climate of the country today. Going out there and asking people, I had people, I'm with the Black Heritage Festival in Clarksburg. I had people turn me down this year who had been supporters of us over 30 years. And I think that everyone's running scared, that they don't want to be labeled as a company that is showing favoritism to people of color, which they're not. But they've been labeled as that. One of our largest contributors of $10,000 said that didn't meet their objectives. After 20-some years, all of a sudden, it didn't meet the company objectives. So we're not going to be well received out there, and we might as well realize that as we go out there in the community. We still, before we leave here, we need to come up with one thing that we say we're going to do as we go back to our branches. Is it the religious aspect of it? One thing that all of us are going to go back and work on? What is that one thing going to be? Okay. Increase membership. Okay.
One thing that irks me is when I'm a member of the NAACP and I have fire in the belly for the NAACP, and yet we have members who won't even ask their neighbor to join. You know, we need to have a pep rally, have a B12 shot for everyone who's in the NAACP. We've got to expect that of our members. Go out and bring in more members.
Yeah. Okay, we've got 13 minutes before we adjourn for today and come back for the banquet. Bob?
So if I can make a quick suggestion regarding membership, if every branch were to try to enhance their education committee with parents, asking the parents to really get to know their particular school and report that back to the NAACP, I think that would enhance the membership, and it would be nice if we had a statewide 30, 40 people that were involved with the education system. And in our branch, the lady who was formerly the DEI said that the advantage of this Senate Bill 199 is that it actually requires training for the teachers, the social workers, school psychologists, but it's the kind of training, and she's going to give us some information about the best kind of training. And if we had people around the state who were sensitive to what was going on in their school, I think we could make a difference with some of the people that were on the board this morning and putting that together.
You know, we say recruitment should be our biggest objective. But when you talk about recruitment and membership, what is the biggest thing that comes up when we say membership in the NAACP? Where's my card? And what is the big issue that we're having with the card now? The portal. That's the big issue, is the portal. And what we need to do is resolve that issue in West Virginia about that portal. If we have people in a branch who's efficient in implementing the portal, we need to pay them to go around to the other branch secretaries, Florence, and teach them how to effectively use that portal. That is the big issue in West Virginia now, is that portal. I've had in Harrison County 10 or 12 members that have been paid, and we couldn't get them into the portal. We need to be proactive, not reactive. That's the only time that the NAACP becomes important to people, when we're reacting to something. When there's nothing going on, we lay back and think everything. Right.
One of the things I want to say, don't ever underestimate our power and our influence. I have been ill, so I haven't been as active as I wanted to, but in one day's time, I raised $1,550 for the state NAACP here in Beckley. The Bluefield Area Foundation donated $500. We have two $400 donations that are anonymous, and we have one for Bill Carter and his wife. And so don't tell me we can't do it. We can. You got to ask. If you have not, it's because you asked not.
I got my own mic. I don't want yours. All right. Normally they don't.
They have a bill, they'll pass it, then there's no money allocated to enforce any of that. So,
Okay, so our number one priority is going back and recruiting. And along with that recruitment, we have to be able to implement that portal system. And if we're still having trouble with that portal, we need to find some way to get people trained to use it. Right? That's what we need to do. We definitely need to do it.
That's what we've been doing throughout the last couple of years since the portal process got started. Sometimes it takes working with one particular officer, secretary of a branch at one time. Because if you don't take it through national, you won't get it anyway. I can tell somebody, show them everything, but they can't even get in to do anything. So that's the first battle we've been fighting. But I understand Jefferson and somebody else recently got there, so it is doable. There was another thought I had while we were discussing the NACP in the church, but my hand wasn't high. I'm too short, so I couldn't see it. A few years ago, West Virginia designated the fourth Sunday of September as NAACP Day. That was the day we were to ask the local churches to address NAACP, whether they take something out of it and preach it, or whether it's just a recognition, something, a piece of history. What we did at Young Chapel is that we had the little girls bombing. We had several different things that had happened, and even put a program together. But that's one way that each September that West Virginia NAACP can be collaborative with an effort. And that is if you just introduce and remind people what NAACP is, and we were able to reach not only the Black Ministerial Alliance in Huntington, but also local white churches. Because Huntington may seem like it's a gigantic sometimes, but all of our people of color and culture and everything else, we come together to have events. You have your out-of-school event, back-to-school event, Juneteenth, you name it. The more that we, as an NAACP, try to work with the other institutions in the community, the stronger we become. And that has helped grow our membership, along with having Sean Hornbuckle there a couple of months ago to speak for 2 hours. And we had a local banker, we have another banker who's Black that helps give out stuff to kids and financial literacy. So some of us are already doing a lot of this, but I think at the time that we discussed NAACP Sunday, it was trying to get something each month that the chapters in West Virginia could focus on. And that way you've got all the other stuff that you're doing, but collaboratively we are focusing on particular subject or movement, and that helps make us stronger throughout the state.
I can't think of a better month to do it in. A lot of great things happen in September, and so a lot of great things happen in September. Okay, we're coming pretty close to it's 3:56. We're going to get out of here so we can get back, and I know that Bishop Sims is going to have some words of wisdom for us this evening. He's going to tell us, "Thus says the Lord." And we do need to get closer to the Lord. The Lord didn't leave us. We left him. And we need to get back closer to him. Several people came to me and said that 8 o'clock was kind of early. We're going to go ahead and try to do it at 9 o'clock, but we're still getting out here at 11:30. So let's be on time in the morning at 9. We're going to strike that gavel at 9 o'clock, and we're going to strike it at 11:30 and be out the door. Okay? See you all back here at the Bishop? Right. Right. All the meetings tomorrow will be downstairs. Be downstairs. Okay. Yes, sir. to get that AKA in there sometime today. I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. Okay, Pastor Harrison, you prayed us in. Let's pray us out, and then you go pray us back in again at the banquet. So, yeah, you got to be on time, and we're keeping you in practice.
Father, again, we thank you, and we can't thank you enough, and we cannot bless your holy name enough. Well, Father, you have brought us together, convening of minds to do right, to do justice. But Lord, number one, to acknowledge we need to return to you. So, Father, we know that you will accept us wholeheartedly back into the fold and do what you have commissioned us to do. Not to make members, but to make disciples for your kingdom. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
For those who stand around at the Holiday Inn, that traffic gets kind of hectic around 5 o'clock. It's tough, so you need to allow for that because the gavel strikes at 6 o'clock.